I love the cyber orange color inside of the Bronco Sport. I think it looks absolutely incredible, just because my primary car right now is also orange, so seeing it inside of this thing, definitely a nice thing. Now, one interesting thing for the 2022 model year of the Bronco Sport, Ford actually opened up the cyber orange color to be available on some of the other trim levels. So in 21, it was strictly available in the Badlands, but it's now opened up to be available in some of the other trims on top of that, which is definitely a nice thing. Now, this is the Badlands version of the vehicle, which is the Bronco Sport I'm going to recommend if you want to take your Bronco Sport off-road. If you're not off-roading, you could look at one of the other options instead, but this is the Bronco Sport Badlands. It's also got the premium package. That's something that's changed from the 21 to the 22 model year. In the 2021, we had things like the Badlands package, the Outer Banks package, and things like that. Those have gone away. We've got a series of other different package names instead. And then one thing that's different is the sunroof is no longer standard in some of those packages. It's now its own freestanding option instead. I do love the styling of the Bronco Sport. I think Ford did a great job on it. Now, a few things to point out. We do have a few different options for our fender flares. So we've got a few different options. So we can either get one that's very similar to the color that we've got here. So nice kind of plastic look, but we can also get one that's body color painted. We can get that from the factory or aftermarket. If you do it aftermarket, you're paying a couple extra bucks in order to get the paint matching done aftermarket instead. So something to think about. Because we're in the Badlands, we've got our Badlands badge along the back. And we've got a series of different tires that are available. So we've got either 17s or 18-inch tires, all season or all terrain. And then for the rim, we've got a series of different options available there on top of that. Now this is the 17-inch, but it also is very unique. It's kind of neat. I haven't seen this rim inside of the Bronco Sport before. There's no mistaking when you've got a Bronco Sport coming at you. This thing looks absolutely incredible lit up at night. Looks really sharp. We've got our LED daytime, nighttime running lamps. We do have options for LED fog lamps, and fogs just depending on the trim level of the vehicle that you're in. We do have our Bronco lettering right along the front, which is very similar to what we're going to see inside of the full-size Bronco. So we've got our little baby brother Bronco here, which is definitely a nice thing. Now that Bronco badge along the front is it pops out a little bit from the grille, and we can kind of just make it out, but we do have active grille shutters inside of this on top of that. Now, because this is the Badlands, we do have our front-facing camera there. So it's a front 180-degree camera. It's not going to be a full 360, but if you're taking this thing off-road, definitely a nice thing to see what's going on in the trail in front of you. Now, speaking of trail, we also do have some tow hooks, just in case you need to either get pulled or you need to pull yourself out of a trail somehow in case you've gotten stuck. Now, that's one of the interesting things, because if you're going to be using this thing off-road, the Bronco Sport specifically, you definitely want to look at the Badlands version of the vehicle. For a few things, as I mentioned, we do have our front-facing camera, we've got the tow hooks, but some things you can't see. Underneath the vehicle, we've got bash plates. So to protect from rocks and things like that scraping underneath the vehicle, this is definitely a good option. Now, on top of that, the Badlands version of the Bronco Sport also has a few other GOAT modes, so our go over any terrain modes. We've got two other options, mud ruts, as well as the rock crawl mode, that we're not going to find in the lower trim levels of the vehicle. Taking a peek along the driver's side door, so we do have a 5-digit number that we can use in order to be able to unlock the door. We can push the bottom two there in order to lock. And then because this one's got intelligent access, we can unlock by sliding our hand, or we can push there to lock the door. So unlocking, and the seat itself is going to be either a power or a manual adjust, just depending on which trim level of vehicle that you've got. Different packages that we can add on to get power seats across the majority of the trim level as well. If we take a peek just to the left-hand side of the steering wheel, we can pop the trunk there if we want to. We can turn our fog lamps on or off if the fog lamps are available in our vehicle. We can adjust what's going on with our running lamps. I always just recommend keeping it in the auto setting. We can increase or decrease the brightness of the cluster screen. Manual adjust for the steering wheel. And then, in order to get under the hood, we're just going to double pull this. So we're just going to pull twice, 1 and 2. Now, because we're double pulling, we don't have any sort of secondary latch we need to pull. It's just up. We've got our bar, and in it goes. Taking a peek underneath the hood, this thing looks absolutely incredible. Now, the Bronco Sport does technically have two different engine choices that are available. But when we get into the Badlands version of the vehicle, it's strictly going to be this, the 2-liter turbocharged engine. So it's the 2-liter EcoBoost in the Ford world, and we're going to find this thing across a number of different Ford and Lincoln vehicles. But this thing is great all around. 2-liter EcoBoost, this thing is going to be able to push out 250 horsepower and 277 pound-feet of torque. So an insane amount of power. Now this one is specific for the Badlands trim level of the vehicle. So if you're in any of the lower trims, you're not going to have this as an option whatsoever. You have to be in the Badlands to get it. Now, as you can see there is no engine cover inside of this thing, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. So I know some people are like, oh, it's got to have an engine cover to hide all of the wires and components and things like that. But it looks nice at the end of the day. It's a machine. And it is kind of cool to be able to see what's going on underneath this thing. Up overhead, we've got a fire shield, but down below, we can easily top up fluids if we need to. We can easily check our oil in the middle, easy access to the battery, and then you can just kind of make it out. So here, let me take a different POV point, but if you want to change out the lamps themselves, so the headlights, you've got the capability to do it. It's very easy access in order to change these things out, which is definitely a nice thing. But down she goes. The first row of the Bronco Sport does not disappoint. Like, I'm 6 feet tall. This is the position that I would normally have this seat set up for. And up overhead, like, I've got like 7 inches of headspace here, which is absolutely mind-blowing. So if you're looking for a Ford vehicle that's got a ton of space, Bronco Sport might be for you if you don't want to look at something like the Explorer, the Expedition, things like that. Now, this specific one doesn't have the sunroof because in 2022, Ford did make the sunroof optional now inside of the Badlands and the other trims of the vehicle. So it's no longer part of different packages. If you want the sunroof, you've got to essentially package it with other things in order to get it. So it is nice that we do have that as an option. But unlike the Escape, where it would be a full panoramic roof, inside of the Bronco Sport, it's just going to be a mini roof instead. Still fairly nice all at the same time. Now, this specific Bronco Sport, the Badlands, it does also have the premium package, which gives us a ton of things. So inside of the Badlands version of the vehicle, it would be manual seats all around. The premium version does give us power driver's seat, which is always a nice thing. And we've got our 10-speaker Bang & Olufsen sound system. So we've got our B&O badge along the top of the dash, along the doors, and a few other places. We've got a wireless charging pad and some other things, but we'll get to that in a second. So starting off, we do have a nice look. It's kind of, like I said, along the door there, we've kind of got like a spun look, which looks sharp. We've got a nice highlight along the door itself, and we do have that highlight actually wrapping through the entire part of the dash around the media screen, which I think looks incredible. Now, a few other things to point out. We do have, so our Ford Co-Pilot 360 package, such a mouthful. But what that package gives us is going to be our blind spot system. So if anybody's entered the blind spot on either side of the vehicle, it's going to let us know. It's going to highlight orange to let us know that. But it also gives us a few other great things. So we've got our lane keeping system. And then because this specific one also has the Ford Co-Pilot 360 Assist Plus package, that also gives us adaptive cruise control, factory navigation, and a number of other things. Now, the Badlands version of the vehicle, specifically the 2-liter engine, which we're only going to find in the Badlands, gives us paddle shifters. So that's going to be a Badlands exclusive. You're not going to find that on any other trim levels of the vehicle. But nice look overall. We've got our bucking Bronco logo right in the middle of the steering wheel. And then, as I mentioned, we do have our adaptive cruise control system along the left-hand side of the steering wheel, as well as our volume buttons we can mute out. Along the right-hand side of the steering wheel, we can answer or hang up on a phone call, we can seek between songs, radio stations, and we've got a voice command prompt. So voice command prompt is great because what that's going to do is it's going to give us the flexibility to make phone calls, change stations, and navigate using our voice. Now, if we were connected through Android Auto or Apple CarPlay through that middle screen, it would also give us the flexibility to be able to do things like use our Siri or our Google Assistant, which is always a nice thing. Now, the steering wheel itself across the entire Bronco Sport lineup is going to be a telescopic manual steering wheel, but it is still nice that it is telescopic at the same time. Now, as I mentioned, stick on the left-hand side is going to be so for our blinkers as well as our lane keeping system, because we've got a button on that tip of the stick we can press in order to turn the system on or off. On the right-hand side, we can adjust our front and our rear windshield wipers on top of that. Now, as we start to move over, so we do have Ford's Sync 3 system, and that's going to be the Sync 3 system across the entire Bronco Sport lineup. So it technically is Ford's previous gen media screen, but if you're contemplating between the Escape versus the Bronco Sport, you might want to look at the Bronco Sport, because we've got our 4x4 standard inside of this vehicle, but even in the base trim level, you will have this nicer Sync 3 media screen instead of Ford's base sync system. So tons of different options that are available there. We are push button start inside of the 3 highest trim levels. When we get into the lowest trim, the base, that's going to be just a regular key ignition instead. As we start to move down a tiny little bit, so we do have our volume rocker. We can turn the audio on or off there very simply. We've got our tuning rocker there. Auto start stop, so the one that's potentially going to kill power to the engine when we come to a stop for an extended period, we can easily turn that one off if we want to. But one of the things to note, if we turn the vehicle off, that will turn off as well. So we do have to keep on turning this thing off every time. We've got our 4-way blinkers, and then because we're in the Badlands version of the vehicle, we've also got our front-facing camera. So we can push this to get a front view or a front 180-degree view, which just gives us a nicer view. So definitely useful if you're going off-road, so going through trails and things like that, to see what's around you as you go. Button press to get rid of it. We've got a button press there in order to be able to get to some audio settings, so treble, mid-range, bass, things like that. Change between songs, radio stations, or we can press this button to turn the screen off if we want to. So we've got our calming screen, or we can turn the screen off completely. Button press again to bring it back to life. Down a little bit more, you can just kind of make it out. We've got a little tray there, so we can easily store some things. It's not the wireless charge pad, but it is nice. The wireless charge pad is actually just down a teeny little bit more. Let's make it a little brighter there, and here we go. So, a few things to point out here. We do have dual zone climate control inside of this thing. Dual zone is an option inside of the Badlands. It's at least going to be single zone across the entire vehicle lineup, but we do have the option for our dual zone climate control instead. So it is nice that we've got that option to easily adjust as necessary. On off, we've got our base climate control settings, and we've got our buttons for our heated seat and our heated steering wheel. Easily adjust as necessary. So we do have the option for heated seats, just depending on which trim level of the vehicle that we're in. And then we can also adjust our fan speed, so we can kind of see it going nuts there as we go up and down. Moving down a tiny little bit more, you might just be able to make it out there, but we've got 2 USB ports, so a USB as well as a USB-C, and then there's also a 12-volt power point there. Now on top of that, if you've got a phone that supports wireless charging, we can just drop in there, and it should take a second, but as you can see, we do have the phone charging up as we go. So wireless charging, which is great. I do wish that this thing was on the Sync 3 screen was wireless. We're not there in the Bronco Sport as of yet. I think it's probably going to be another 2 years before we see it, but we at least have that wireless charge pad. It's funny, this is the iPhone 7 Plus, which doesn't have wireless charging, but size-wise, it fits in there perfectly, and there's some wiggle room. So if you're in like the Samsung S21 Ultra, so those larger phones, or the iPhone 7, the iPhone 13 Pro Max, you'll have no issue being able to get your phone into that wireless charge pad there. It's definitely going to fit, no problem. Now, as we start to move down a teeny little bit more, we do have a few other things to look at. So we've got a rotary dial there. So great thing there. So we've got our park, reverse, neutral, drive, or we can flip it into the manual mode instead, which lets us easily adjust what gear we're in as we go using the paddle shifters on the steering wheel. That's going to be exclusive to the paddle shifter specifically when we're in the Badlands trim level of the vehicle. We've got our electronic parking brake, so we're just going to pull up to turn the parking brake on. We're going to hit the brake and we're going to push down in order to turn the parking brake off. We've also got our auto hold setting there, so you can kind of see that it's on there. So the auto hold setting, what that's going to do is it's going to hold us in place. So if we are in drive, we take our foot off the brake and it's going to literally hold the vehicle in place there instead. Brake, back into park again, and we can turn the system on off as necessary. We also have our trail control button there. One of the benefits of that trail control system is that if we're going over more rugged terrain, we can have the vehicle hold us at a certain speed, so we only have to worry about the steering wheel instead. We've got our four-wheel drive lock, we've got our rear differential lock instead, and then there also is our traction control, so we can adjust as necessary. And then the entire Bronco Sport lineup does have a series of different GOAT modes. So it's go over any terrain modes and a series of different ones. So we've got 5 minimum inside of the entire vehicle lineup. But when we get into the Badlands version of the vehicle specifically, we do also have our mud ruts as well as our rock crawl mode. So if you're going to be doing off-roading, the Badlands is going to be the best one that you can go for. Big reason why, we've got those extra drive modes. We've got bash plates, that front 180-degree camera on top of that. So if the full-size Bronco is a bit too big, the Bronco Sport Badlands is probably where you're going to want to be. Now, the GOAT modes are great. So like I said, we have a ton of different options that are available. Moving down from there, we've got a few different cup holders, and we also do have an armrest with some more power points. So we've got 2 in the front there, just by our wireless charge pad. We've got 2 in the armrest, and we've got 2 just behind the armrest there on top of that. So ton of power all over the place. And we've got a decent amount of storage there, so we can easily store things. As we move up overhead, so just above that sync media screen, the screen itself is great. So what I'm gonna do, if you're looking for a fuller walk around and how that media screen works, check down below because I have put together a crazy comprehensive video on how to use it all. But it is amazing, and it's the same way with the steering wheel. Like if you wanna know how these things work, check down below for those comprehensive videos instead. But just above the screen, so I mentioned we've got that little highlight. It's like a bronze type of a highlight there. And we do have our stitching there, which again, like it is very, very sharp looking. We do have our Bang & Olufsen badge just on the very top of the dash there, right by the front windshield. Up overhead, we do have our auto-dimming rearview mirror. We do have our cabin control lights. And then we've got sunglasses holder. Now, if we had the option with the sunroof, we would have some buttons that we can press over along the top there in order to be able to get that going. Because we're in the premium version of the Badlands, we do have our HomeLink system. HomeLink system is our garage door opener, so we can easily program in a garage door opener if we've got one at home. We do have our vanity mirror that does have lights built in, and this thing extends out literally all the way. So we can block sun, anything that might potentially be hitting our eyes, which is definitely a nice thing. The second row of the Bronco Sport is super comfortable and extremely spacious, like a ridiculous amount of spacious. Like I'm 6 feet tall. Driver's seat set up for somebody 6 feet tall, and I've got a great amount of knee space, great amount of foot space, and up overhead, I've got like 6 or 7 inches of head space back here. So if you've got some taller people, they'll probably be able to comfortably fit inside of the second row of the vehicle. But overall styling is great. Very similar to what we saw in the first row of the vehicle. We've got those highlights that follow through the door. Nice feel back there. It's kind of like a carbony type of feel, which is great. It's got like this like weave type of texture, which is oh so nice. Now we do also have a few things. So we do have some zipper pockets behind the driver and the passenger seat, and it is a decent amount. I can get about this deep, which is a nice thing. We do have a ton of space back here. Now those pockets themselves, not necessarily standard across the entire vehicle lineup. Because we are in the Badlands trim, we've got that as an option there. And even looking at the seats, like I mentioned the seat styling, we've got our leather trim seats versus a regular cloth seat instead, so a cloth bucket. Again, just depending on the trim that we're in, we're gonna have a series of different style seats that are available. But one great thing about the Badlands trim is what's going on with the second row seat inside of the passenger side, but we'll get to that one in a second. Because we're in the Badlands, we do have some cup holders, which is great. And just behind the armrest in that first row, so our first row armrest, just behind that, we've got some power points. So we've got 2 USB ports, so a USB as well as a USB-C, and then there's also a 400-watt inverter back here. So if we want to plug some things in, like a laptop to power it up, we've got the flexibility to be able to do it. As we look up overhead, we do have some handles there, and we've got a hook along both the driver and the passenger side. And then we've got a little light back here, which we can control. We can turn on and off very easily. And another thing to point out, so unlike the Escape, which this is based off of the same platform, the second row seats in the Bronco are fixed in place. So we don't have the flexibility to be able to recline them. We can't slide them forwards or backwards whatsoever. So they are locked into place permanently. But like even with the seats all the way back, like it's super comfortable. Like we can adjust the headrest very, very easily. There's a button just to the side there in order to be able to do it, but it is fairly nice overall. We do have some anchors and tethers and things like that, so if we've got child seats, front facing, rear facing, not gonna be a problem getting them back here. But one great thing about the Badlands, and about the Badlands specifically, if we look into that passenger seat, so that passenger second row, we do have a little button along the seat. We can push that in order to lift it up, and we've got some storage underneath. Now, it's not going to extend out across the entire part of the vehicle there, so it is more or less just for the seat, but it is nice to know that if we need a little bit of extra storage, we've got it, and this whole tray is fully removable. So we can literally just kind of take this thing out, we can hose it down. It's funny, it actually does have some footprints on there, so assuming that we're maybe throwing some shoes and things like that into this second row back here. Filling up fuel inside of the Bronco Sport, also straightforward. So along our driver's side, we've got that little cutout. Capless system, typical Ford styling, just insert your fuel hose, fill up, and you're good to go. Now, the cap itself is actually non-lockable across the board, so if you're concerned with fuel theft and things like that, there are some aftermarket accessories, specifically some locks, that you could look at instead. So whether you decide to do that is going to be your call. And then we do have some mixed numbers looking at the different fuel economy for Canada versus the States for the 1.5 as well as the 2-liter turbocharged engine. Now, fuel quality, just regular 87 octane is the minimum manufacturer's recommendation. But, as always, when we get into the horsepower and the torque specs, that's achieved using a premium fuel. Now, because this is the Badlands version of the Bronco Sport, I would recommend, if you're taking it off-road specifically, so doing rugged off-roading, or even if you're in the lower trims and you're doing towing, you ideally want to use a higher premium fuel when the engine is going to be under a larger load. So ideally an 89, 91 would be perfect though, and you will notice a huge increase in the performance when you use it. Now, back into the Bronco Sport is nice. It's kind of boxy, very similar, as I was mentioning, to the early 2000s version of the Escape. So if you're not a bigger fan of the new Escape that was redone in 2020, looking at the Bronco Sport gives you that boxier look with more cargo space, but we'll get there in a second. Looking at the tail end here, we do have our gorgeous lamps in the back. We've got our Bronco Sport badge in the back there, all on top of that. And one of the great things about the Bronco Sport is it's got the capability for towing. And you'd have to get the tow package from the factory, or you can do it aftermarket. Downside of aftermarket, cuts your towing capacity down. Benefit of getting the tow package from the factory is that it also includes a full-size spare tire rather than just a mini spare. And that's going to be the same for Canada and the US. When we look at towing capacity inside of the Bronco Sport, it's going to depend on if you have the 1.5 or the 2-liter. Because we're in the Badlands, this is the 2-liter EcoBoost engine, which means that this thing can pull 2,200 pounds. In the lower trim levels of the vehicle, you're going to be able to pull about 2,000 pounds. Well, not about, it is 2,000 pounds max inside of the lower trims of the Bronco Sport. Now, this one does have the reverse park sensors, and that's because this one has the added premium package. Now, Ford did a few things, as I was mentioning earlier, to different packages and options and things like that for the 2022 model year. So if you want the reverse park sensors inside of the Bronco Sport Badlands specifically, you do have to get an added package to do it, but it is still there as an option. Now, one great thing about the Bronco Sport that I love, what's going on with the back end here. Because just by our backup camera, so we've got two individual buttons. We've got one for the glass and for the door, which means we could literally lift the glass up separately if we wanted to, or we could have the full door go up and down. All right, taking a peek at the key fob for the vehicle. So it's unchanged from the 21 to the 22 model year. We've got our Bronco badge along the very back of the fob. Nice look as always. We've got our unlock and our lock button, our remote start, trunk release, as well as our horn or panic alarm. And then along the very bottom, we do also have the emergency access key. Now, inside of the Big Bend, Outer Banks, and the Badlands, we are going to have this style key fob. When we get into the base, it's going to be just a regular key instead. One of the nice things is that we can remote start directly through the key fob. Very simple. We press the lock button once, circle button twice. Remote starts going. In order to cancel, we press that circle button there again once. Now, if for whatever reason yours doesn't have remote start directly on the fob, you could use the Ford Pass app on your cell phone, so whether that's an Android or iPhone device, in order to remote start that way as well. Now, on the fob, we can also press this button twice in order to be able to get into the trunk of the vehicle. But one of the nice things is that even if you've got the key fob in your pocket, I was showing you earlier the reverse camera. We've got two individual buttons there. So the one on the left is for the glass. So that's great. I love the fact that we've got that option. Nice and simple. But we could also press that button just to the right-hand side of the backup camera in order to be able to lift this thing up. Cargo dimensions for the vehicle are going to be showing up, and as you can see, we have a nice amount of space back here. It's very different from something like if we were looking at, let's say, the Escape. So, tons more space back inside of the Bronco Sport in comparison. But one thing to point out back here, so we do have a 60-40 split, so 60% driver, 40% passenger. We can easily fold down one side or the other if we need to. A few different dimensions that are showing up because we've got our loading area width and our height specifically. But if we go inside the vehicle, we have a little bit more height when we get inside. So we've got a little lip there, but we get quite a little bit of extra space along the top end of the vehicle. Now, another thing to point out, along the second row, the back part of there, we do have a rubberized tray, and that's fully removable. Now, that rubberized back is not standard across the entire Bronco Sport lineup. You do have to be in specific trims to get it, but you could also do it aftermarket instead if you wanted to as a dealer option. We do have this part here, which is fully removable, always a nice thing. We've got our mini spare tire underneath. Now, I mentioned it earlier, when we get into the Bronco Sport with the tow package, we will have a full-size spare tire, which is definitely a nice thing. Along the left-hand side of the cargo area, we do have a few hooks. It's the left and the right side, so we can get a tray that we can throw into that cargo area. So if we wanted multi-tier storage, we could do that. Available as an option directly from the factory, or you could do it as an aftermarket accessory instead. We do have a little button along that left side, and that's actually for some floodlights in the actual liftgate. So I think it's brilliant that Ford did that, and they are adjustable. So if you're loading up later on at night, we do have some lights, not only in the trunk area, but also along the top of the liftgate, which I think is absolutely brilliant. Along the right-hand side of the cargo area, we do have a few power points. So we've got a 400-watt inverter back here, as well as a 12-volt power point on top of that. Nice thing. We do have a light in the back, which does have a nice Bronco logo on it, so I think that looks sharp. And then one great thing, we do also have a little bottle opener along the passenger side in the cargo area. So you're camping, need to pop a bottle, this is where you're going to make it happen. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, that's nice. That's a good start. One thing I love about the Bronco Sport is it's got, well, a number of different things. Like this specific one has the added premium package, which is why the seats inside of this thing look so nice the way that they do. But I mean, premium package, it's got the Ford Co-Pilot 360 Assist Plus package, which also gives us the adaptive cruise control system and a number of other great options. No, yeah, the Badlands is great, like especially if you're considering the Bronco Sport, if you're going to take it off-road, you're definitely going to want to go for the Badlands. Like it's got bash plates underneath the vehicle. It's got a few other great things you're going to find specifically in only inside of the Badlands trim level of the vehicle. I do love the fact that we've got our heated front seats. We've got the heated steering wheel there on top of that. And then we've got the auto start-stop system. But looking down, there also is the option for, what am I looking for? The auto hold setting, there we go. So we're driving right now, but the auto hold setting's turned on. So if I take my foot off the brake, the car literally is going to stay in place, and it's literally all thanks to that auto start, or the auto hold system. This person behind me is hilarious. All right, here we go. I love the fact that we can use the adaptive cruise system on regular city streets. Like it's such a great system. I literally your set it and forget it cruise control system. Like I don't think I ever stop talking about that cruise control system whenever I am on test drives because it is such an amazing system. This guy's going nuts. It's hilarious. Wow. Zero, like literally zero patience. Like, dude, you're not getting anywhere. There's cars literally all over the place. Watch this. In 2 seconds, this guy's gonna cut out to the right. Like, zero patience whatsoever. Things aren't going his way. Oh, that never used to happen until I saw a chiropractor. By the way, so ridiculous. Yeah, well. We do have an auto-dimming rear-view mirror, which is nice. It's available across the majority of the trim level lineup. But it's interesting with the sunroof. Like, it's not a full panoramic roof like what we would see inside of the Escape. And the reason why I say the Escape is because the Bronco Sport and the Escape are built off of the same Ford platform. It's, I believe, the C6 platform. But that's why some of the things are very, very similar from the Bronco Sport and even the Ford Maverick. They're built on similar platforms, so there's a lot of similar technology, gizmos, gadgets, and other stuff. All right, so one of the cool things, this thing's got paddle shifters. Let's go for it. That was nice. All right. This is nice, so nice and responsive. Of course, this lady's just gonna go over and people are so impatient. Like 2 seconds. 2 seconds is all you have to wait. And like for some people, that's just too much. It's too much waiting. So ridiculous. Here's some more Bronco Sports. Formula Ford Lincoln out in Pickering. It's part of a larger dealer group, but if you're after a Ford or Lincoln, these guys are awesome to deal with. Okay, look at this. So because we should have beeping in a second here. Purposely do that. No, there we go. There we go. All right, So you hear beeping? There's snow behind me. I'm not gonna hit anything. It's literally because there's a little bit of snow behind me there, and that, but it is neat. It's so neat that we've got that option. And here we go. It's gonna go again. 3, 2, and done. But that was a look at the 2022 Ford Bronco Sport, specifically the Badlands trim level. What did you think? Overall, with the features and what this thing offers, I think it's absolutely incredible. But if you have any questions, drop down in the comment section below and let me know. I'm more than willing to talk you through any issues that you might be having, give you some ideas. We can kind of bounce ideas off of each other. If you have an idea for a future video, let me know. I'll give you a shout out when that thing's shot. But think about subscribing because it helps the channel grow. Like the video at the very minimum. And if I see you next time, take care. Back again for the 2022 model year is the second row of the Bronco Sport. Across the entire Bronco Sport lineup, we do have a series of different go modes.